the flickering shadows. Isabella's love for painting began in her childhood, inspired by her grandmother's rural home. The idea of moving to a quiet town felt perfect, a fresh start after a tumultuous year. The house she chose was modest but had character. Wooden floors that creaked, large windows that let in soft sunlight, and a small art studio she eagerly claimed as her own. The first few days were peaceful. Isabella unpacked, set up her easel, and began working on a series of landscapes inspired by the nearby woods. It wasn't until her fourth evening that she noticed something peculiar. A shadow danced across her painting. She assumed it was the old light fixture, but as she leaned closer, she realized the shadow wasn't random. It resembled a hand, fingers long and thin, reaching out from the canvas. She stepped back, her pulse quickening. The shadow disappeared, and she tried to brush it off as her imagination. But over the next week, more strange occurrences plagued her. Paintings she hadn't touched seemed altered. A figure appeared in the background of her forest scene, barely visible but undeniably present. One night, as Isabella worked late into the evening, she felt an overwhelming presence behind her. Turning slowly, she found her latest painting, a serene mountain lake, had changed entirely. The water now churned violently, and a dark shape loomed beneath its surface. Sleep became impossible. She moved her paintings to the basement, hoping to escape their unnerving transformations. But the basement had its own horrors. She found a stack of old, rotting canvases left by a previous tenant. Each depicted a similar shadowy figure, growing clearer and more detailed with each painting. Desperate for answers, Isabella contacted a local historian who revealed the house's dark past. A former owner had gone mad, claiming their artwork had been possessed. They vanished without a trace, leaving only their haunting paintings behind. Isabella tried to destroy her canvases, but the shadows seemed to multiply. One night, she awoke to find her paintings covering every wall of her bedroom, the shadowy figure now fully formed, staring at her with empty eyes. She screamed, but the house absorbed her voice. When her friends came to check on her days later, they found the house empty. All that remained were Isabella's paintings, now eerily realistic, each featuring her figure trapped within. The echoes beneath. James, Lauren, and Miguel were thrill-seekers by nature, always searching for their next big adventure. When Miguel stumbled upon a blog about a forgotten mine, they eagerly planned a weekend trip to explore it. The mine was tucked away in a forested area, its entrance overgrown with ivy and marked with a rusted, "Danger. Keep out" sign. Undeterred, they ventured inside, flashlights cutting through the pitch darkness. The air was stale and the walls dripped with condensation. "Imagine what they used to pull out of here," Miguel mused, his voice echoing. Lauren chuckled nervously, her fingers gripping the straps of her backpack. As they moved deeper, the atmosphere grew oppressive. Their jokes subsided, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the occasional drip of water. Then came the tapping, soft at first like a pebble striking metal. "Did you hear that?" Lauren whispered, her flashlight shaking. "Probably just an animal," James replied, though his voice lacked conviction. The tapping grew louder, more deliberate, as if someone or something was following them. Miguel led the way, his boldness waning with each step. They stumbled into a large cavern, its ceiling dotted with stalactites. In the center was an old mining cart, rusted and filled with broken tools. Lauren gasped, pointing to the ground. Scratched into the dirt were words. "Turn back." Their flashlights flickered, and the tapping turned into whispers, unintelligible but distinctly human. Shadows danced on the walls, their movements unnatural. "We need to leave," Lauren pleaded, her voice breaking. But the mine had other plans. The tunnels twisted and turned, defying the map they brought. The whispers turned into screams, echoing from every direction. Miguel disappeared first, his flashlight dropping to the ground. James and Lauren found no trace of him, just the faint smell of sulfur in the air. As they ran, they stumbled into another cavern, this one filled with skeletal remains. Lauren screamed as a hand reached out from the darkness, grabbing her ankle. James turned, shining his light, but there was nothing there. The whispers became laughter. The mines seemed alive, feeding off their fear. When search parties arrived days later, all they found were 3 abandoned flashlights and a chilling message scratched into the rock. "You can't leave the forgotten room." Emma and David had fallen in love with the old Victorian house at first sight. Its weathered charm and spacious rooms seemed perfect for starting their new life together. The house had been abandoned for years, which explained its low price and the overwhelming amount of renovation work required. As they unpacked their belongings, Emma noticed the locked door at the end of the upstairs hallway. "Did the realtor say anything about this room?" she asked. David shrugged, dismissing it as an old storage space. For days, the door gnawed at Emma's curiosity. David tried several keys, but none fit. Frustrated, he decided to pry it open with a crowbar. The lock gave way with a metallic groan, and the door creaked open to reveal a small, windowless room. It was empty, except for a single wooden rocking chair facing the corner. Dust floated in the air, disturbed by their entry. Emma shivered as an inexplicable chill washed over her. The walls were bare, save for faint, illegible scratches. "This is unsettling," Emma murmured. David, trying to lighten the mood, joked, "Maybe it's where the boogeymen lived." They shut the door and vowed to leave the room alone. But the house had other plans. That night, Emma woke to the faint sound of creaking wood. Her heart raced as she listened carefully. It was coming from the locked room. She nudged David awake, and they crept down the hallway together. The door was ajar, though they had locked it earlier. Inside, the rocking chair moved slowly, as if pushed by an invisible hand. David stepped forward, but Emma grabbed his arm, whispering, "Don't." The next day, Emma found scratches on the hallway wall near the door, fresh ones. They resembled words, but the letters were jagged and incomplete. That evening, she insisted they sleep in a hotel, but David convinced her to stay, assuring her that the stress of the renovations was playing tricks on her mind. As days passed, the activity escalated. The chair's movements grew violent, slamming against the walls. Emma found deep claw marks on the doorframe, as if something had been trying to escape or get in. One evening, while David was out running errands, Emma decided to confront the room. Armed with a flashlight and her phone, she stepped inside. The air was heavy, and the faint smell of rot filled her nostrils. She approached the chair, her flashlight trembling in her hand. A sudden, deafening slam made her whirl around. The door had closed on its own. Panicking, she tugged at the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. A low whisper filled the room, growing louder until it became a guttural scream. Emma turned back to the chair and froze. Sitting in it was a figure, a gaunt, pale woman with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. The figure stood, her movements jerky and unnatural. Emma screamed as the room went dark. When David returned home, he found the house eerily silent. The locked room was empty, but on the walls, the scratches now spelled out a single word, mine. Emma was never found. The night caller. Lisa had always loved her job as a late-night radio host. She enjoyed the quiet hours, the solitude of the soundproof booth, and the companionship of her loyal listeners. Her show, Midnight Airwaves, was a mix of music, stories, and calls from people seeking a connection in the still hours of the night. One Thursday, She began the show as usual, playing a melancholic jazz track before opening the lines to callers. Her first caller was cheerful, talking about their plans for a midnight drive. The second caller shared a spooky story about a ghost sighting. The third call, however, was different. "Hello, Lisa," the voice rasped. "Good evening. What's your name?" Lisa asked. "You already know it," the voice replied. It was low, gravelly, and unnervingly calm. Lisa felt a chill but tried to maintain her composure. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met. What would you like to talk about tonight?" The caller chuckled softly. "I've been listening to you for a long time. Watching you." Lisa's hand hovered over the button to disconnect the call, but something about the voice compelled her to stay. The caller began recounting intimate details about her life, things no one outside her close friends could know. Lisa's breath caught as the caller described her morning routine, the exact layout of her apartment, and even the scent of her favorite perfume. "How do you know this?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The caller laughed, a distorted, unnatural sound. "I told you, Lisa. I'm always watching." The lights in the studio flickered, and the soundboard sparked. Lisa's producer, watching from the other side of the glass, looked equally unnerved. Lisa disconnected the call, but the line remained active. The caller continued speaking, their voice now coming from every speaker in the studio. "You can't hide from me." Lisa glanced toward the soundproof window and froze. A dark silhouette stood on the other side, motionless. Her producer burst into the room moments later, but the figure was gone. The phone lines remained dead for the rest of the night, and Lisa ended the show early. She never returned to work. Weeks later, her replacement reported receiving a call during their first shift. The voice on the line was chillingly familiar.